Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Lambda School, a revolutionary new school that invests in you, and InnoReader, an RSS service that helps you take control of the web today. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I think I've realized more this year than any other year that every single app developer releases an update right before WWDC. What do you think?
It's been a strange week, I would say, as we were preparing because we knew that we had a feeling that, developers tend to release their last app updates before Apple announces a new version of iOS. So we had a general idea. But we were not expecting these avalanche of updates.
Right. I mean, it's not like we don't know that this happens. I mean, we've been through it before, but I think this year, more than past years, at least the ones since I've been working with you, has been just bananas. There's been a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
So we're going to do another pick two today because, we've been obviously reviewing and thinking a lot about apps that have been updated recently. And two that were just updated are Spark, the email client for iOS and macOS, and 1Password 7, which just got an update for the Mac. So you reviewed Spark 2, and I reviewed 1Password for Mac Stories. And we thought we'd dig in a little deeper and give a little more of our impressions of both the apps and what we're using them for.
Right. So, of course, talking about email, it's one of my favorite topics here on App Stories.
Sure.
We covered our wishes for the ideal email client a few episodes back, I think. That was fun. And that was actually the starting point for my story on Spark 2. The idea that I've tried multiple email clients over the past few years. I would say that I've been trying email clients on iOS ever since Apple sort of started accepting email clients back in the days of Sparrow. I remember Sparrow as being one of the first really popular third-party email clients.
Yeah, remember the days when you couldn't do a mail app? It's really hard to even remember, but yeah.
There was one, I think, called not Mail Pilot, but something like Mail Wrangler, maybe. Back in 2008, 2009, I remember John Gruber and during Fireball covering this, that the developer of this application couldn't release the app on the App Store because Apple didn't want, competing apps that replicated system functionality. That used to be one of I'm not sure if it's still a guideline of the App Store, but you couldn't do email clients. Anyway, over the years, I sort of developed this list of features that I'm looking for in an email client. And those include modern features that have become sort of conventions of email clients, not the protocol, the email protocol, because these are non-standard features. Stuff like snoozing messages or sending them later or including read receipts. All these features are options that email clients, so the apps, they need to implement themselves. They are not in the IMAP standard of email communication. There is no feature that is called snoozing. So that is something
right.
that third-party developers invented. I think Mailbox was the first app with snoozing on iOS. And ever since, it's become commonplace in any modern email client. And that is one of the things that I'm looking for. Or, for example, the ability to pin a message to the top of your inbox to easily see it later. All these modern features. And in addition, I also want my email client to be customizable. So I can customize the sidebar, for example, with shortcuts to my favorite folders and mailboxes. Or, of course, I want integrations with other iOS apps. I want to be able to save an email message that John really wants me to take care of in Things and set a reminder, because otherwise John gets upset. Or
he does. Very upset.
I want to be able to, take an email message with the tracking number and send it to deliveries. So all these communications between my email client as a starting place and third-party apps as a destination. And we've talked about many of these email clients on App Stories. And Spark 2, I think, is the first one that, in addition to these features, also tries to address one of the common problems that we run into with email clients on the Mac Stories team, which is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
We, like many other teams, I think we have an email collaboration problem in the sense that email was not built with collaboration in mind. It's not a communication protocol that was designed for teams. was designed for individuals. But as a team, we use email a lot because a lot of developers get in touch with us because we get notifications for status updates for servers or for, betas that developers submit to TestFlight. We got all kinds of emails and we need to discuss them. But there's never been an easy way to share emails with each other that is not the classic email forward. When you forward an email to somebody else and that person receives this message that includes a bunch of quoted text.
Right. And there's, I think from like our standpoint, to contextualize it even more, is that there are really like 4 places that a lot of the emails go in any given day. One, it might come into the tips email thing that's linked on the website where someone just sends us a tip about a new app, or it might just go to you, or it might just go to me, or it might just go to Ryan, or it might go to 2 of the 3 of us. I mean, that's the problem really, is that you never know exactly what channel it's going to come through, and more likely than not, it's not going to come through to all of us at the same time. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Lambda School, a revolutionary new school that invests in you. A lot of us can relate to wanting to become an expert in a field we're passionate about. If you find yourself thinking, I've always wanted to learn about that, Lambda School is for you, because it means you're someone who knows they have the capability to learn a new area of expertise and want to act on it. And if that thing you've always wanted to learn is software engineering, you're going to want to listen really closely to what I'm going to tell you next. Lambda School is offering a free 2-week course in iOS development. It's taught by experienced instructors who have trained hundreds of iOS engineers. These are people who've worked on Apple's Everyone Can Code program for schools and businesses around the world. The course is 2 weeks and totally free. That's right, it's absolutely free. And it's your first step into iOS development. If you haven't heard of Lambda School, they train people to be software engineers at no cost up front. That's right, no cost at all. This is a really interesting business model. Instead of paying tuition, students agree to pay a percentage of their income after they're employed, and only if they make more than $50,000 a year. If a student doesn't find a job or doesn't reach that income level, they never pay a cent. To get a taste of what Lambda School is like, you can try the free no-obligation 2-week iOS Development 101 course. It runs for 2 weeks from Mondays through Thursdays. It includes live instruction, an opportunity to practice problems with people on hand to answer questions, small group discussions, and an overview of Swift, Xcode, and UIKit. So head on over to lambdaschool.com/appstories right now to find out more and get started. That's lambdaschool.com/appstories. We'll put a link in the show notes too. Our thanks to Lambda School for their support of this show and for giving our listeners a step towards a successful iOS development career.
Again, I wanna stress how over the years I forwarded, I want to say thousands, but seriously hundreds of emails to somebody else on the Mac Stories team. And it's always inconvenient because the other person is able to read the message. But if they want to respond, they either need to manually delete the quoted part of my comment. So for example, let's say that somebody gets in touch with me and I forward the message to John and I say, John, can you take care of this person? That is not a nice thing to see, on the other end. And so John needs to go in and manually get rid of the plain text of my message. Or they need to manually copy the email address of the person and create a new message, paste that address, but that email will contain my original comment. So it's not a pretty or easy system to deal with.
Yeah, or sometimes you start a brand new message and you say, hey, Federico asked me to get in touch with you because X, Y, and Z, and that's just kind of putting all that context in. It just slows you down.
Yeah. So with this context, Spark 2 comes in and offers these collaboration features, which arguably they are the reason to upgrade to this new version. Spark can still be used as an email client for free for individuals. There's basically no change in terms of design or how the app works. If you're an individual user and you don't need the team functionalities, what you're going to get in Spark 2 is app integrations. So you can save email messages into third-party apps and the ability to create a public link for an email message. which is an interesting idea. I know that some people are slightly uncomfortable with it. The concept is you take an email message, and instead of forwarding the message to somebody else, like a family member or a friend, you can upload the message to the web as a standalone, dedicated mini web page. So the email message becomes a web page, sort of like a Droplr link. Like you generate a landing page that you can send to somebody else, which is a handy way to, for example, today I wanted to share something with you guys in our Slack, and I didn't really want to add you as a collaborator because there was no sense in sharing. It was like a press release. So I just uploaded the press release from my email using Spark to the web, and I sent you the link to that message, which was what...
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's what you had done there.
Yeah, that's what I did. And I can also see how some people may say, well, I know that Spark is already fetching my messages on my behalf because I connected my Google account, for example. But seeing the message on the web is maybe like a step too far that I'm not sure about, because you're literally taking a message and uploading the message onto a website.
Right. That's one where I would do it for something like you just described, where it's some kind of generic press release that's already public information, not directed to us in particular, but you want to still share it. But if it was something that was like an embargoed information about an app or anything that was a little more sensitive or private, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I agree. And there's if you're a free user, you can delete the link at any time. But of course, you get more controls and more features if you pay for the premium subscription, which brings me to the team functionalities of Spark 2. So the developers of Spark Riddle, they've taken a different direction with Spark 2 than what they planned for, with the original app. It came out 3 years ago. And at the time, I remember they were sort of floating around the idea of offering in-app purchases to unlock different ways to categorize your email messages. And that plan, of course, changed ever since 2015. And now Spark has become this sort of service that you subscribe to and you pay for if you want to, which is designed for teams. And there's maybe three key features. You can share an email message with your team, with another team member, or with multiple team members at once. You can chat, you can have conversations alongside email messages, which is kind of like a iMessage or Slack sort of mini chat view instead of an email thread. And you can collaborate in real time when composing a new email message. It's kind of like Google Docs inside of the message composer in Spark.
Right.
These are the three main features. And I want to highlight the first two in particular, which are sharing and chatting. The sharing one is exactly what I've been looking for all this time. And it's a proprietary replacement for forwarding a message to another person. Instead of doing the forward, what you do is you share. So you add a collaborator to a message. Kind of works like adding another person in Apple Notes. So there's a tiny person icon, you tap it and you share an email message. And what happens is on the other end, and you can confirm this because I did this a bunch with you, you get the message arrives in your inbox and it says, Federico shared this with you, but it's still the original message. So it's still the original sender, originally addressed to me, but now it's also in your inbox. The problem is it's only in your Spark inbox.
Yeah, I want to mention one other limitation too, which is, and I ran into this pretty quickly, which was you shared an email with me last week at some point, and I went looking for it earlier this week, and I remembered that you had quote sent it to me, and I went searching for Federico, and it doesn't come up.
Right.
It doesn't work the same way as a forwarded message. It looks like it's a message from the original sender, and it makes it impossible to search for that, which I think that's like a tweak on the search system that I'd like to see Riddle implement.
Right. There should be a search filter to say, show me messages that Federico shared with me, which is possible because Spark offers this natural language search. So that's a great suggestion. Otherwise, you can go into the dedicated shared page, which is a list of all the messages that have been shared with you or that you've shared with other people. It's the same, really. It's shared messages. But the idea of taking a message and instead of doing the forward, so essentially adding more plain text to the original message, you take that item and you share it with somebody else, I think it's exactly what we've been looking for. So if I receive a message about an interesting new app or a press release that I want to share with you or Ryan, I can just give you the original message and you can respond to it saying, I don't know, thanks for the message, Federico sent this to me. But you won't have to deal with the plain text of the forward or with removing, any email address. It just works.
Right.
And the only and I say it's a problem because it's not a traditional email feature. This shared message, when it arrives in your Spark inbox, it's only there. It's only in the Spark app. It won't appear in Apple Mail. It won't appear in Gmail. It won't appear in any other traditional email client because it's a Spark only feature. Then the moment you respond, of course, you will see the sent message synced up to your email service. But as long as you just receive a shared message, it will only show up in Spark, which for some people that could be a problem. But for us, I'm really happy with the way that this works. I've been adding you and Ryan to a bunch of messages that I receive because people like to get in touch with me, and it's been really convenient.
Well, it's been, I've really liked it too. And just to give you a concrete example is that you and I have been trying to set up some interviews recently, and we're dealing with time zones around the world and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of a pain, but I've been kind of taking the point on some of them. You've been taking the point on the other ones. And when it gets to the point where I need to check with you as to what days and times you're available, instead of, CCing you on the message and you getting all the back and forth, or just forwarding it to you and asking you what you think, I can share it with you and you can see it, but you don't have to participate in it as much. And then we can use the chat, which I know you'll get to in a second, to kind of work out between the two of us what time is the best. And then I can just get back to the person and you don't have to have been in the thread at all.
Having been also on the other side of the sharing, it's really helpful because you can add me just when you need me. There's no need to keep me up to date all the time or to being present in the CC field of an email message for all the messages.
It's terrible.
It's terrible, which also brings me to the chat feature. This is interesting, and it's not, I should say that both sharing and the inline chats, it's not a feature that Spark 2 pioneered. There's other products that do this. Front, for example, comes to mind, or Missive, or I'm not sure if Polymail has sharing and chatting, but Front and Missive definitely do. But I think Spark is the only one that is more of a high-profile app in the Apple community. I think they have a native macOS and iOS application. I've seen all the other apps and they're not really nice. They kind of look like web apps. So the inline chat is a way to coordinate quickly around an email thread without letting the other people, the people on the other side of the email conversation know that you're chatting. So for example, this person that we're trying to coordinate an interview with sent us a timetable of time zones that is available to do interviews. And you shared the conversation with me, so I was able to see the email message. And then you also added a message saying, take a look at this chart. And I think this is a really convenient way to quickly coordinate over email, because otherwise you would have done the following. You would have forwarded the message to me, and the message would have likely lost the inline image, because when you forward a message, the inline attachments are usually not displayed anymore, especially if you use Apple Mail. And then you would have sent me a message either on Slack or iMessage saying, hey, open your email and take a look at this.
Go find this thing and tell me what you think.
Exactly. So instead, in a single place, I was sent this conversation without being added to the CC field. And then I got a message from you right inside the same email thread saying, hey, you got to do this. I think this is perfect for me because I don't have to go look for an email message manually. Everything stays in one place. It's contextual to the email conversation. At first, when Riddle told me we're gonna have chats inside of email, I was like, no, I don't need another messaging client.
Right.
But then I think it kind of makes sense.
Being contextualized makes a lot of sense because you can do all that kind of coordination with the message right there instead of having to take the back and forth to some other channel. And that I was surprised that I would like that too. I kind of had this similar reaction to you, but it is really nice. I really enjoy. I mean, we don't have like long conversations under an email, at least. I mean, we've only been using this for a few weeks, but I don't really anticipate that we're going to have long drawn out discussions next to any particular email.
I hope not.
But it is good for the quick, hey, Federico, here's the thing in this email that you need to focus on. And then you can say, oh, okay, here's what I think. And then we're done. I mean, it's really nice in that way.
And finally, as I mentioned, you can also compose an email message with multiple people at once. We have no use for this type of feature, but I heard from a few people today on Twitter, there's some types of organizations, such as universities, for example, or people who work in labs, so like doctors and technicians. They often a bunch of people need to confirm that an email message is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, incredible damage will be caused to the organization.
Sure.
So I can see why for some types of companies and organizations, it makes sense to have multiple people collaborate on an email message and double checking everything. We, as a small publication in the, compared to the New York Times, we don't need this type of feature. It's pretty cool. It's a bit slower than Google Docs, but it's surprisingly well done, and it's definitely faster than collaborative editing in Apple Notes for sure.
Oh, definitely. We gave it a test run and it works well. I think you're right. It's a little slower than Google Docs, but it still works perfectly fine. But my immediate reaction was exactly the same. It's like the day that you and I and Ryan find ourselves all in the same email message, trying to compose one email message to a developer, we're in big trouble.
So that's Spark 2. You can download it for free. You can actually use it as a team for free. There's a generous free tier that you can try, which is what we're doing at the moment because we set it up for the three of us. So it totally works as a team of three. We're probably going to pay for it. I still need to decide. So you can go on the App Store to download Spark on iOS and macOS, and you can go on Riddle's website to take a look at the pricing options for Spark Premium. And I don't want to say that it is my ideal email client, but as I wrote on the site, it's definitely the closest I've ever been to being kind of happy with an email client. That's as far as I'm going to push myself. Kind of happy.
Yeah, it's hard to ever be totally satisfied with email because there's so many different things that you want out of an email app. And I think what one person versus another wants out of email is just different. So it's one of the hardest apps to get perfect for a broad audience. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by InnoReader, the place to discover, organize, and monitor the web. InnoReader is your one-stop portal for information. It doesn't spoon-feed you news algorithmically. Instead, InnoReader puts you in control, helping you quickly and easily navigate and manage vast amounts of information. Subscribe to your favorite channels in InnoReader, and they'll be automatically delivered to you in chronological order, so you never miss a story that matters. Then, use filters and rules to control what you see and how you see it. You can add feeds from anywhere. InnoReader handles RSS feeds. It has an extensive catalog of suggested feeds. There's a browser extension for adding feeds as you visit your favorite websites. And it even works with social networks like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and email newsletters. InnoReader is for anyone who wants to get the most out of the news. It's used by all sorts of professionals. Bloggers love it for research and integrations with tools like Evernote, OneNote, and Dropbox. Marketers can use InnoReader to stay on top of their clients' businesses, and PR agencies can collate every mention of their clients' online activity by using a global active search. InnoReader's safe searches are also invaluable to research institutions that can track specific areas of interest. I've got a little preview for you too. Soon, InnoReader will add a daily email digest of the most popular articles from among your subscriptions to help you stay on top of the most relevant posts even when you don't have enough time to read all of your subscriptions. Visit InnoReader.com and take control of the web today. Our thanks to InnoReader for their support of the show. So I want to talk a little bit about 1Password 7, which just came out for the Mac this past week. And it's really nice. They did a great job of expanding the feature set as well as redesigning the app. And I guess one of the points that I want to make right out of the box is that for years I used 1Password for really nothing more than a secure place to store passwords. It may as well have been just a long list in a note that was secure. I didn't really use a lot of the other features, but they've come a long way, and they've got things like Watchtower has been updated. The vaults are a lot easier to use. But I'm going to start, I guess, talking about the design, because the design is really nice. It's one of those things where it's a fresh coat of paint, which is always nice, but there are little touches that make using the app a lot better. For instance, the left-hand sidebar now collapses. And if you're in 1Password and all you're looking for is a series of logins, you don't really need a broad sidebar with all the different categories of things you can do in the app. You can collapse it down, and this is especially good on a smaller laptop like a MacBook or a MacBook Pro. And it's just a narrow strip of icons that are in a nice it's a new dark theme for the left sidebar, which reminds me a lot of Slack, which to me is kind of the modern 3-pane view Mac app, right?
Totally, yeah.
So it's taken that motif and brought it over to 1Password. So it looks good, but it's also functional because you can collapse that sidebar. And then they've added new things to features like Watchtower. And Watchtower, I think, is one of the highlights, because that is a feature that started out its life as does a check of a website to figure out which websites that you have a login for that have been compromised. And it lets you know this is a compromised website and you should change your password. Now, and it does that without actually transferring any of your password or your information, which is really nice. But it does so much more now. It's become kind of an audit tool where you can go and you can look at all the stuff you have stored and you can see all the vulnerabilities, whether it's a compromised site or maybe it's a weak password that, at a weak moment, you made your password 123 ABC.
Yeah, it's really a weak moment.
A very weak moment. Or maybe you're one of those people, and I know I've been guilty of this, of using the same password, especially for less important stuff, using the same password on multiple sites. It'll tell you about those. It'll also tell you about unsecured logins, and the transition to HTTPS has happened. I mean, most sites now for logins use that protocol, but you may have signed and saved login credentials for sites back, 5 or 10 years ago that weren't secure, and you're still going to those unsecure login pages if they're still available and logging in that way. 1Password will tell you what those are, and you can then go find the secure login page and log in a lot more safely.
So does this feature talk to an online database of passwords that have been compromised?
It does.
Is it, have I been owned?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's what it works with. So it's a good way to figure out exactly which sites have been compromised. All right. The other thing it does, Watchtower can tell you which sites use two-factor authentication, but where you're not using it. So, two-factor authentication at times has been a bit difficult to implement. So I know in the past have skipped enabling two-factor authentication on some services just because I knew it was going to be a bit of a hassle. It's a lot easier now, especially since like 1Password on iOS can do the random password generation that lets you log into a site with two-factor authentication. So this will just let you know what all the sites are where you don't have that enabled, and you can go in and decide whether you want to do that.
Nice.
Yeah, which is nice. And then finally, it tells you anything that's expiring. And that could be, 1Password can be used for more than just passwords for web services. It can be used for, you can store your credit card in there, your passport information, your driver's license, all that. And so if you have expiration dates associated with any of those things, it'll alert you in advance, which is really helpful for things like passports, where it's not like a credit card where the credit card company just sends you another one in the mail at some point. You have to actually go do something in order to extend your passport in most countries. So that's what you can do with Watchtower, is get an alert so you know to do it before you have to travel somewhere. So I've been really happy with Watchtower, and I'm trying to set aside some time in the next few weeks to actually go through it and tick off some of the more important things there that I haven't done in the past.
Yeah, I really would like to see these features on iOS too.
Yeah.
You know, especially on the iPad, if I want to do some spring cleaning with my logins and passwords and enable two-factor on a bunch of websites, I don't want to use my MacBook for that. I would love to see these features on the iPad, if only on the iPad, because using Safari on the iPad is much better than on the iPhone.
So another big feature is the way vaults are handled, and there have been times in the past, I think, where vaults were a little bit cumbersome to switch between. A vault is essentially like a folder of passwords and other items in 1Password. And there are reasons to keep them separate. You might want to have one vault for personal stuff, another for business, or maybe you're on one of the sharing programs like the family plan or the business plan, and you have a set of passwords you want to share with your kids, but not all your passwords, or on a team where you want to, some people need to have some passwords, but others don't need other ones. So you can create different vaults and then share them separately, which is nice. And the other thing now, the vaults, it's really just another item in the sidebar. You just double click on it and you're in the new vault, and you can drag passwords and logins and all the other information that you store in 1Password from one to the other. Copy it, paste it, whatever. And it's really easy to manage and edit right within the sidebar, which hasn't been a feature in the past, but makes using vaults a much more useful thing at this point. All right, so this is such a big update. It's very hard to kind of encapsulate everything, but there are a bunch of other little things and all other little features that I think are very helpful to have. Markdown now works with secure notes.
Nice. Okay.
It's not quite the Markdown that I like, and what I mean by that is you write in Markdown, but you don't get any kind of contextual preview of what's bold versus italics and all those things, or an H1 or H2. You write in Markdown and then you hit save, and then it formats, the formatted note shows up in 1Password. But it's nice. It's a way to get rich text into a note. There are app logins I've always found to be a little cumbersome with 1Password because, as opposed to being in a browser where you can just drop the username and password right into the fields, with apps, you'd have to go to 1Password, copy the username, paste it, find the password, copy it, paste it, and go back and forth a lot. Now, when you do that, it's not quite the same experience as on the web, but if you go to 1Password, when you've got an app open, the menu bar, mini 1Password, it will automatically search for that app. And they've got a big database of a whole bunch of apps and suggest the one that you need. So you don't have to actually perform the search yourself, which is a nice touch.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, this sounds like it's impossible to do on iOS. Because
that I think is true.
Yeah,
yes.
Because as long as Apple does not offer any API for apps to say, what is it that you're doing at the moment, an app cannot possibly know that, unless you do stuff like with launching URL schemes, but they cannot know that you just came from, I don't know, Tweetbot, for example. So that seems like something that will be impossible to bring over, which makes sense because on the Mac you can do these things.
Few other things to quickly mention. There's a new font for displaying passwords, and it's important because if you find yourself ever in the position where you have to read someone a password over the phone,
oh God,
or whatever
no.
it happens, these things still happen, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but sometimes you're not logging into something, but you have to get a password to someone and you have to read it to them, or maybe you're in the same room with them and you're reading them the password. They have a new font. It's based on Courier Prime, and it's Courier Prime Bits for Agile Bits, which is the maker of 1Password.
Nice. Okay.
And it's just a really good plain text monospace font that makes it very easy to distinguish between similar characters, like a lowercase l and a 1 and a pipe character. Makes it much easier to distinguish between those, which is important when you're trying to figure out exactly what your password is.
Okay.
There are nested tags. You implement them by doing the tag name / and then another tag name. So the one after the / will be the sub tag. And there's handoff, which I really like because I'm always bouncing back and forth between my Mac and my iPad or iPhone. And 1Password is one of those apps that I use a lot on both platforms. So if I happen to be on one, looking it up on my phone, but really want to log in on my Mac, all I have to do is do, the command tab and find the 1Password handoff icon, get that, and it'll open it right up, which is fantastic. I like that a lot. It's a great shortcut. There are a few things I don't like, though.
Okay.
One is 1Password Mini, which is the menu bar app. It's different. It doesn't work like your typical menu bar app. It's not, it doesn't kind of drop down from the icon in the menu bar. It's not attached to the menu bar. It's a window that opens, and it doesn't have much Chrome. It's a big search field, which is great for finding things. But if you want to resize it or move it around the screen, it's very hard to find a place to click on and actually resize it or move it. And it's just non-standard enough that I think it's a little bit counterintuitive for most people. And it caught me off guard. I mean, it took me a minute to figure, oh yeah, this actually is resizable, because there are parts of it that you just can't resize. And the background of the window, it's just one white window. There's no title bar or anything that gives you any kind of affordance to figure out exactly where it is you should be dragging. So that's a little bit of a problem, I think. And I guess finally, you can do custom icons for vaults, but I don't really like the icons that they have. They have about 30 icons or something like that, and they're just not favorites. But you can put in your own image, so it works a little bit like Contacts, where you can drag in your own image for someone, and that's what I've been doing when I've created new vaults instead of using the built-in icons. All right, Federico, do you have anything else this week?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again to Lambda School and InnoReader for making this episode possible. As always, you can find both of us writing at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.